this and what I talk about here. So when I talk about comprehension in this case, I'm talking about knowing what the text literally says. Interpretation and inference are slightly different here, with interpretation focusing on readers' experiences and inferences focusing on the facts. I love the way Jim Burke defined the formula for an inference. It's new information plus known information equals an inference. So something I just read based on something I bring plus something I bring to the text. Understanding is having a clear, complete idea of it. So understanding being beyond comprehension in this case. And then annotation. I think we have a good idea what we mean by annotation, but just talking about marking up the text in some way.
He asked me to talk.
So, and then a little bit of history here. I think it's important to think about where close reading comes from and the tradition that it comes from. Now, I'm not going to get too into this as far as a literature lecture or anything of the sort. But really, it comes to us from two traditions. And that's the exegetical tradition, often associated with religious texts, where we're analyzing small things in a text, small different possible meanings in there. And that comes from the Greek root, meaning to explain or interpret. We also have this French formalism that influences it, mid-century, mid-20th century French formalism. They called it explication des textes, which is about as fancy as I'm going to get tonight. And it is similar to that, where we're looking at very detailed, but relatively objective examination, focusing on structure, style, imagery, things like that. And so in literary criticism, we've come to think of close reading as careful, sustained interpretation of a brief passage of a text. And so that's how it's being defined within the world of literary criticism, a brief passage of a text. And that's something that we need to keep in mind, a lot of us. And a lot of people will be like, yep, I knew that, Brandon. And most people do, but then I do encounter classrooms where we're trying to do close reading, sustained close reading over longer texts. And I worry about what Warren called read-aside, which is a great book, by the way. So why this webinar? You'll see here things I know from my experience. I know that close reading needs comprehension. And these are the things we're going to dig into. You know, what do we know about it and why does it work? How do we make it work well? Close reading helps students learn to focus on small things. Close reading is about smaller texts or smaller parts of the text. Close reading needs multiple readings of the text or time to regularly return to it. You might not be rereading the entire chapter for a second or third time, or those 2 or 3 pages a second or third time, but returning to what you did read to dig into the text. And then finally, close reading needs to be trained, modeled, and taught. It's not natural. And I say this a lot to teachers I work with and people that I do these sorts of webinars and presentations with. We think a certain way. That's what's driven us to study what we're studying. We're into literacy. We're into reading. And we're studying these things because we've got something innate in us. Now, I'm not saying we didn't learn stuff. We do have to learn things, but along the way, the things we learned clicked for us, and we were getting it. Our students aren't always like that. And we'll talk a little bit more about you as their expert in a moment, but we need to remember that these things need to be taught. Now, things I've noticed. We're going to talk more about this at the end. We'll debrief on these a little bit. But as I've spent a lot of time in different classrooms, coaching teachers, working through different districts and different schools, I see these things happening with close reading a lot. And I want everyone to know that I see these things and I think, hey, these things are happening with the best of intentions. But sometimes we don't know or we're not aware that we're doing these things to students, I guess I should say. Close reading often gets conflated with annotation. So just telling kids to annotate the text, but not recognizing the reading skills that go with it. This is especially prevalent in the upper grades when we get up into 10th, 11th, 12th, where it's easy for teachers to assume that kids know how to do certain things, and the kids don't always know how to do certain things, or they're not confident or comfortable doing them. Close reading can actually get in the way of comprehension, as one of you said earlier, and I appreciate that. Close reading can interfere with the student understanding of the larger text. Again, those two are similar, very similar. Close reading can sap the joy of reading. It can be confused for text complexity. I've seen that too. And then close reading can send a message that literacy is a robotic exercise, not a cognitive process. So we won't spend too much time with those. We're going to spend time mostly with the things we know and talk about some ways to approach them. So real briefly, as I said just a moment ago, it has to be said before we do anything else, close reading is not annotating, but they are related. Does anybody want to tell me why I'm bothered by this? Anybody want to put in the chat why this chart bothers me? Warren saying it's too much at one time is because it is so specific. Lindsay, in a way, it's so specific, right? Right. Nothing speaks to meaning. Oh, Mark, and you all are nailing it. And so having all of these literary techniques, which interestingly enough, some of these could go together. Like a lot of these are comparisons that could fit together. Metaphor and simile should probably be together as they become figurative representations. Victoria says the chart is task driven. You're right. And there's just a lot. There's a lot here. And if I saw this in a teacher's room, my next thing would be to see how they're working through this. Is this up as a reminder? And today we're focusing on metaphor? Fine. Or is this something like, okay, today here's a new text and I want you to spend the next 20 minutes annotating it for all of these things. That's not teaching. That's assigning. Now, I know I'm seeing a snapshot in time. And so it would become a discussion with students. It would become a discussion with the teacher. They may have gotten there. They may have learned all of these things. But the particular situation I'm talking about wasn't this exact chart, but one like it. And it was the second week of the first semester. And the teacher was having them do this before they had a discussion about the text. And it left me wondering a lot about where the teaching was. And the subsequent discussion wasn't that valuable to the teacher because the kids were able to put their finger on the things that they were finding, but they weren't linking it to meaning. But it's well-meaning. Like the teacher had the right idea. The kids were getting into the text. They were finding things. And so the coaching that came out of that was narrow this down to the one or two things that you're wanting to focus on in this lesson. And then start talking about how those things and show and model how those things in different texts can relate to meaning and then get students into that. And so something like this is really more of an effective model where we're focusing on the close reading, not the annotating. The annotating is in service of the close reading. We're close reading for a certain thing and we're annotating it. But as they read, I encourage, and it's not just me, this is what a lot of the research says, I encourage students to make these marks during that first read, because if they're making notes and asking a lot of questions and annotating a lot on their first read, they sometimes don't recall what the text was talking about. They haven't comprehended the text. They read it, they found some things, they asked some questions, but they don't really understand possibly what the whole text, especially students who are reluctant readers or struggling readers. And so having them just use symbols like this is a stellar way to get them to focus on, oh yeah, this is interesting, but I'm going to keep reading. So I just make an exclamation point or a question mark. And y'all, I'm not talking just about freshmen or the repeating sophomores I used to teach. I'm talking about my AP classes. I'm using this with my college courses too when they're reading articles and things. I encourage them, read it first, because if you're stopping to make a ton of notes, you're going to lose track of your train of thought. Right now, there are other people who speak other ways, and they want students who are interacting and making comments with the text as they read it the first time through. If that's useful for them and in their classroom, great. But I see that being more successful with students who are already, in general, successful readers. Okay. There's a poster that I found that I thought was really useful. Could be in the classroom. You can see the source for it down here at the bottom. And I love this because it has students interacting with the text, marking it, but they're not necessarily stopping and spending a ton of time making notes or asking questions the first time through. Second time through, they may go back and review those notes and make some marks and things like that. All right. And Victoria expanded on her comment in the chat, y'all. I appreciate it, Victoria. The chart teaches students what they need to meet the expectations for the class, but not how they can use annotation in any class to get deeper understanding, right? There's no transfer ability for that. Great. Okay, so one of the things we talked about that we know about close reading is that close reading needs comprehension. And if you remember, I define comprehension for my purposes right now as a literal understanding of what the text is saying, what the text is talking about. So I'm going to read this paragraph to you aloud. Here we go. Climate change is like a giant blanket wrapping around the Earth. It makes it warmer over time. This warming affects many things, like our oceans, which are getting hotter. When oceans warm up, it changes weather patterns and can lead to more intense storms. Wildfires are also becoming more common in some places because hotter temperatures and dry conditions make it easier for fires to start and spread. One way people are fighting climate change is by using windmills to create energy without pollution. Windmills use the power of the wind to make electricity, helping us cut down on pollution from fossil fuels. By working together, we can try to keep our planet healthy and safe. All right, we read it. Now, we read it. We get it, right? Let's put in the chat. What did you note as you were reading? Is there anything you noticed? Drop something in the chat for me. And if you're frustrated by that and I moved too fast, that's the point. Just stay with me. The blanket metaphor. Good, Tracy. Yeah, great. All right. Oh, too far. Somebody tell me, what was this about? Just drop in the chat. Global warming. Good. Anybody else? Changes to the climate, impact of climate change. Great thing. How did different things mentioned relate to one another? How did some of the different things we mentioned that were mentioned in that paragraph relate to one another? I'll be quiet for a moment because that'll take a little bit of a longer sentence for someone to respond to. As an effect, I see increase of natural disasters. All right. And then what should we take away from it? Anyone? Solution to the problem. Yeah. All right. So some of you were probably saying when I asked you these questions, oh, I need to go back to it. Or can we go back and look? That's what we want to do as trained readers. But I guarantee you, if I was in a room with you and I asked you all to raise your hand, if you had students who would see these questions and not want to return to the paragraph, you would all raise your hands. So that is one of the ways that we can help them understand why close reading is important to them. Okay, so if I come back to it and I have the same question,